Chapter 1661. It was also right at this moment that Tang Wuling came plummeting out of the sky like a golden shooting star. A resounding explosion rang out, and Lu Jingyun had already drawn upon his soul power to ward off the resulting shockwaves, but he was still struck by a rush of dizziness, and the entire world around him had turned golden. Tang Wuling had slammed violently onto the ground with scorching dragon's repulse erupting out of his body, transforming into a giant dragon's head with a diameter of dozens of meters. The dragon's head let loose a thunderous roar, and the oncoming waves of great energy were kept at bay. Unable to reach the soul car, Ling Zichen rose up into the air in her pink mecha, but just as she was about to do something, she was suddenly struck by the feeling that her body, soul, and mind had all been frozen solid. Specks of pink light appeared on her mecha, and an energy barrier took shape, protecting her from all directions. Looking down at the battlefield, Ling Zichen couldn't help but draw a sharp breath. She wasn't a soul master. She was simply an ordinary person who had attained extraordinary power through technology, and her dedication to technological research could be partially attributed to the fact that she wasn't a soul master. She had always felt that the technology she developed would surpass all soul masters someday. She was going to surpass natural gifts with her technology. She had constantly been striving toward this goal, and had made one breakthrough after another, which had instilled within her immense confidence. However, she couldn't help but be stunned as she calculated the intensity of energy at the epicenter of the clash. Was this the power of top-tier soul masters? She could clearly sense that infernal King Douluo Harris's aura was more powerful than that of any soul master she had ever encountered. In terms of individual combat prowess, even Cao Dachi seemed to be inferior. However, Tang Wuling had charged into battle against such a formidable foe without any hesitation, and he really had managed to keep Harris's first attack at bay. Was he going easy on me during our sparring match? At this point, Lu Jingyun had already rushed out of the car as well. A clear ringing sound rang out as he quickly donned his suit of battle armor, and a white dragon projection emerged beneath his feet to carry him up into the air. At the same time, a white longsword appeared in his hand, and the tip of the sword was a dragon's head that was moving incessantly as if it were a living creature. This was his martial soul, the flying dragon sword. The sound of horse hooves pounding on pavement suddenly rang out, and a series of massive figures emerged from within the darkness. At the same time, countless shadowy figures appeared in the grey world. This was Harris's infernal King Legion. The Legion was led by the 12 infernal horror cavaliers, and they converged toward Tang Wuling from all directions. The grey and golden colors on the ground subsided almost at the exact same moment, thus revealing Tang Wuling and Harissa. Harissa looked at Tang Wuling's three-word battle armor and remarked, "You've developed very quickly. It's a pity that everything ends here for you." As soon as his voice trailed off, he slashed his infernal king sword through the air, and the grey world instantly turned transparent. All of the grey mist abruptly took on a translucent quality, and Tang Wuling's body was instantly transformed into a grey crystalline statue that was rooted to the spot. Ling Zichen's heart immediately jumped into her throat upon seeing this. Right at this moment, a massive figure appeared in the dark night sky, and a huge grey blade of light descended directly toward her. Ling Zichen instinctively shot back in retreat, and a pair of short spears appeared in her grasp, releasing two slim beams of light that instantly fell upon the grey blade of light. A resounding explosion of pink light erupted forth, and an armor-clad cavalier appeared before being blasted back through the air. Immediately thereafter, a dragon's roar rang out, and a white dragon struck the cavalier's chest with a dull thump, forcing it back even further. Instead of setting off in pursuit of the cavalier, Ling Zichen drew back her arms before hurling both of her spears toward Harissa in unison. However, Harris's gaze remained fixed entirely on Tang Wuling, and he slashed his infernal king sword through the air again. As a result, the pair of short spears were instantly transformed into grey crystalline structures, and were immobilized on the spot. "This is my world, and it has no place for you." He pointed his infernal king sword toward Tang Wuling's crystalline body as he spoke. "No." Ling Zichen screamed as scintillating pink light erupted from her body, and she instantly reached Tang Wuling before positioning herself in front of him. At the same time, the pink light around her body turned a bright red, and a burst of extremely fearsome energy fluctuations radiated forth. All of the energy cores on her body were releasing energy fluctuations more than 10 times more powerful than before, but at the same time, the energy had become extremely violent and unstable. Harris's infernal king sword reached her in an instant, but was forced to a standstill in the instant before it struck her body. The fact that even Harissa had been stopped cold in his tracks was sufficient testament to just how fearsome the energy fluctuations radiating from her body were. The red light expanded and instantly struck Tang Wuling, sending him flying back through the air, while Ling Zichen took advantage of the propulsion force to launch herself toward Harissa. Harissa was finally forced to direct his attention toward this woman, and he murmured to himself, "Where did this madwoman come from?" At the same time, he flew back like a bolt of grey lightning, not daring to clash with Ling Zichen. Right at this moment, the deathly grey ground was suddenly illuminated by a layer of piercing reddish golden light, and a reddish golden vine abruptly emerged from the ground, then wound itself around Ling Zichen, who was about to continue attacking Harissa. At the same time, Tang Wuling's voice rang out, "Can't you have some confidence in me? Hurry up and control your energy." The roars of countless dragons rang out, and a series of reddish golden dragon patterns emerged from the ground, releasing powerful blood essence fluctuations that turned the entire grey world of reddish golden color. The statue in the distance abruptly exploded, and Tang Wuling re-emerged in his suit of three-word battle armor. His body had swelled to over 3 times its original size, and there was rainbow light shimmering all around while his battle armor had become a lot thicker and heavier than it normally was. As he took a series of steps forward, a string of crisp clangs rang out. Tang Wuling's suit of three-word battle armor had clearly undergone some type of change, making it seem quite bulky and oversized, but also resemble an immovable mountain. His golden blood dragon domain was released to its fullest extent, and a series of giant reddish golden dragons were rising up out of the ground. This was only a suit of three-word battle armor, but for some reason, it seemed to be different in Harris's eyes. He couldn't pinpoint exactly what was different. All he could sense was that there was something hidden within this suit of bulky battle armor. The slender golden dragon spear had already appeared in Tang Wuling's grasp, and with the release of his golden blood dragon domain, his aura was spiking at a drastic rate, as were his scorching blood essence fluctuations. Chapter 1662. A faint smile appeared on Tang Wuling's face, and a band of reddish golden light that was around 5 meters wide emerged from beneath his feet, instantly forging a connection between himself and Harissa. As a result, Harissa was struck by the feeling that his aura was being suppressed. It was his bloodline that was being suppressed by Tang Wuling's golden dragon king blood essence fluctuations. In the next instant, the reddish golden light had reached him like a violent wave. What was even more formidable was that in the instant that the wave of light reached him, it converged to form the sharp tip of the golden dragon spear. This was a combination of Tang Wuling's path of regal domination and all or nothing. Under the enhancement of his golden blood dragon domain, the two attacks were incredibly powerful, and were definitely at the limit Douluo level. At this point, Ling Zichen had already withdrawn her energy, and she had only just managed to stabilize her own mecha when this scene unfolded. It was as if countless reddish golden giant dragons had risen up in her field of view, guarding Tang Wuling from all sides, while Tang Wuling himself seemed to have become the ruler of this entire world. The image of the spear strike he was unleashing against Harissa left a deep impression in Ling Zichen's heart. Never did she think that a man could put on such a spectacular and breathtaking display. In the face of the reddish golden spear projection, Harissa did nothing more than raise his head, yet as he did so, the entire time and space seemed to have instantly congealed. Massive white web patterns appeared within Tang Wuling's golden blood dragon domain, striking the onlooker with an involuntary sense of horror. At the same time, Harissa's eyes had turned completely white. His infernal king sword appeared in front of the spear projection as if it had been there all along, and as the tips of the two weapons clashed, a crisp clang rang out, following which the reddish golden color quickly began to fade. The giant reddish golden dragons wailed as their bodies were shattered, and all of the reddish golden color in the surrounding area was replaced by deathly grayness again. Countless deathly beings were revived, forming another army that stormed directly toward Tang Wuling. Harissa was one of the most powerful evil soul masters in existence, and in this instant, he was unleashing his true power. Tang Wuling could sense that Harissa's upper body had swayed upon being struck by the golden dragon spear, but it had only swayed ever so slightly. Tang Wuling was very satisfied with that spear strike. In the face of such immense pressure, the all or nothing he had unleashed had been imbued with unprecedentedly powerful spear intent that was finally bordering on the realm of spear essence. From spear intent to spear soul to spear essence, each step entailed a fundamental leap. Tang Wuling was only a hyper Douluo, yet he had been able to sway a quasi-god like Harissa, and that was certainly something to be proud of. However, Tang Wuling had no time to linger on that feeling as his three-word battle armor domain had been crushed, and even his suit of three-word battle armor had dimmed slightly. The infernal army had converged from all sides, and Harissa was also approaching. Lu Jingyun was already struggling to ward off the surrounding death cavaliers, and it was Ling Zichen who had swooped in to save him. Harissa's infernal hell had sealed this entire area, so no messages or signals could be sent out. Furthermore, he had chosen to to attack right in between Shrek Academy and Heaven Dou City, so they were situated quite far away from both ends. Two strangely shaped skeletons pounced toward Tang Wuling, wielding massive bone sabers that were several meters in length. Golden light flashed within Tang Wuling's eyes, and his battle intent was unshaken despite the destruction of his domain. He stomped his left foot heavily onto the ground, and the gravity within a diameter of 100 meters around him abruptly changed. All of the deathly beings in that area were instantly reduced to dust, clearing out a wide berth around him. This was the gravitational control of his mountain dragon king torso bone. Right at this moment, Harissa descended upon Tang Wuling before unleashing an unavoidable strike with his infernal king sword. Tang Wuling lashed out with his golden dragon spear once again, unleashing his fury of the masses in retaliation. Another crisp clang rang out, and Tang Wuling was forced to stumble backward, but at the same time, he thrust his left hand toward the ground, using controlling crane capturing dragon to send himself flying horizontally to evade the second sword strike. Immediately thereafter, he unleashed his ghost shadow perplexing track, unleashing countless spear projections to attack Harissa from all directions. Harissa's movements seemed to maintain a constant rhythm that wasn't slowing down nor speeding up, but each sword strike that he unleashed was extremely difficult for Tang Wuling to nullify. In the face of Harissa's fearsome offensive power, Tang Wuling was forced into constant retreat, but he was somehow able to hold his own. At this point, Harissa's killing intent had been elevated to the very max. Even though he hadn't unleashed a full power attack yet, he was already using the full power of his domain. Even a rookie limit Douluo would struggle in the face of attacks of this caliber, yet Tang Wuling was able to withstand them, albeit with some difficulty. This young man was already this formidable as a hyper Douluo. Once he became a limit Douluo, he would be a truly fearsome opponent. Furthermore, how was his soul power so abundant? Clashes of this level of intensity were extremely taxing on one's soul power, and generally speaking, a quasi-god naturally had a significant advantage over a hyper Douluo in this regard. However, Tang Wuling didn't seem to be displaying any signs of weakness. All of this proved that he was different, and the immense potential he was displaying as a hyper Douluo was truly very disturbing for Harissa. Harissa had been a quasi-god for quite a long time, and it was exactly because of this that he knew just how difficult it was to make the final breakthrough into godhood. In order to do so, one would have to break through the boundaries of this realm, and without the guidance of the divine realm, this was a virtually impossible task. The Holy Spirit cult had provided a theoretically viable plan to accomplish this, which was why he had joined them. Even though Tang Wuling was still only a hyper Douluo, Harissa could clearly sense that he had the potential to break through all limits in the future. He definitely couldn't allow Tang Wuling to fully develop as once he did so. It was very likely that a new divine realm would be created. Once that happened, the Douluo continent would have a new master, and as the ruler of this world, there was no way that Tang Wuling would allow evil soul masters to become gods. With that in mind, Harissa suddenly ceased in his attacks, and countless spear projections instantly fell upon his suit of grey battle armor. However, even the formidable golden dragon spear could only leave some slight indentations on Harissa's suit of forward battle armor. Before Tang Wuling had a chance to consider why Harissa had abandoned his offensive efforts, Harissa's eyes suddenly turned a deathly white color again. Chapter 1663. Harissa gripped onto his infernal king sword with both hands, then plunged it into the ground before him. All of a sudden, grey light erupted around his body like a blooming flower. This was not good. As soon as the grey light began to spread, Tang Wuling was immediately struck by a sense of severe peril, and he immediately reacted. The passage of time was instantly altered, and even though the time reversal domain was restricted to a certain extent within Harissa's domain, it still slowed down Harissa's attack ever so slightly. An explosive boom erupted from Tang Wuling's body as 7 golden rings appeared around him. Using his golden dragon vibrational explosion, he was able to free himself from the restriction of the surrounding domain and launch himself backward. On top of that, he was releasing his dragon's repulse with all his might to form the most resolute defense. The grey flower petals only faltered for an instant before descending, and his dragon's repulse was almost instantly dispelled by the grey light without being able to offer any resistance. Not only was energy being dispelled, the same applied to space. In the wake of the grey flower petals, the surrounding area had turned a pitch black color that threatened to devour the entire world. This was Harissa's 8th soul skill, Withering Death. The 8th soul skill unleashed by a soul Douluo would pose next to no threat to Tang Wuling, but the 8th soul skill of a quasi-god was a completely different story. Even though Tang Wuling had reacted very quickly, his body was still slightly corrupted by that grey color. His battle armor immediately displayed its immense defensive prowess to try and keep the grey color at bay, but it refused to be stopped, quickly spreading over Tang Wuling's suit of battle armor, causing it to turn grey and brittle. Right at this moment, bursts of lightning erupted out of Tang Wuling's body. Initially, the lightning was of a purplish blue color, but immediately thereafter, hints of rainbow light began to appear, and all of it was directed toward Tang Wuling himself. The rainbow light was able to stop the greyness in its tracks, but the latter still refused to be completely dispelled. Tang Wuling drew a sharp breath upon seeing this. This rainbow light was the power of elemental tribulation that he had accumulated within his own body. It stood at the pinnacle of all powers in this plane, and in a sense, it could even be referred to as godly power. However, the grey energy was able to hold its own against this power. If it weren't for this elemental tribulation power within his body, his battle armor would be beyond salvation. If he had reacted any slower and been contaminated by more of this energy, his entire body would have most likely withered away just like his dragon's repulse. Little did Tang Wuling know, Harissa was even more astonished than he was, and he exclaimed, "That's essential elemental power." His withering death contained his understanding of godly power. As a quasi-god, he already possessed some of the traits of a god, and that was exemplified through this withering death. Thus, as soon as the energy came into contact with Tang Wuling's body, he had thought that Tang Wuling's fate was sealed. Even the tiniest drop of withering death would quickly spread over his entire body and reduce him to nothingness. However, never did he think that Tang Wuling would be able to release so much essential elemental power to nullify withering death. Even for a being of Harissa's caliber, withering death was extremely taxing and couldn't be used in succession. As such, both sides appeared to be quite calm, but that was far from the actual case. Harissa drew his infernal king sword and unleashed a sword projection directly toward Tang Wuling. At the same time, his ninth soul ring lit up. Crap. Judging from the withering death, it was clear that Tang Wuling would be unable to withstand Harissa's ninth soul skill. Much to Harissa's surprise, instead of taking defensive or evasive measures, Tang Wuling drew back his arm before hurling his golden dragon spear through the air. The spear strike wasn't directed toward Harissa. Instead, it was aimed up into the air. Harissa was already preparing to unleash his ninth soul skill, determined to kill Tang Wuling even at the expense of a massive expenditure of power. The golden dragon spear almost instantly pierced through a death cavalier, and even its infernal energy couldn't avoid being devoured by the spear. As the owner of the golden dragon spear, Tang Wuling was immediately reciprocated in the form of an influx of energy, and at the same time as he held his golden dragon spear away, he had also summoned a burst of golden light that stopped Harissa's sword projection just in the nick of time. The two clashed, and the sword projection was quickly dispelled, while the golden light remained completely unmoved. The golden light then quickly took on a substantial form, and its top end was plunged into the ground, while its shaft had withstood Harissa's attack. This was a shimmering golden trident with a large glowing gem at the base of the trident's central spike. It was none other than the sea god's trident. Tang Wuling reached out to grab the sea god's trident, and due to the fact that he had passed 2 of the 9 trials of the sea god, he had developed a high level of affinity with the weapon. He took a step forward and waved the sea god's trident through the air, releasing a string of golden halos that encompassed this entire space. The grey domain power was completely unable to stop the golden halos, and it was as if they didn't even exist in the same plane of reality. Harissa was in the process of preparing his ninth soul skill, and his pupils instantly contracted as the words transcendent divine weapon crossed his mind. A divine weapon was a weapon that had been used by a god and possessed godly power, whereas a transcendent divine weapon had to be the main weapon of a first rank god or above. Even on the entire Douluo continent, Harissa only knew of 1 or 2 transcendent divine weapons in existence. Never did he think that Tang Wuling would be in possession of one. Even a quasi-god may not be able to stand against a transcendent divine weapon. Thus, Harissa immediately relinquished the preparation of his ninth soul skill, directing his infernal king sword toward the oncoming golden halos instead. However, the surrounding space seemed to have instantly become layered, and before he knew it, he was completely immobilized and could only look on as the giant golden trident slammed into his body. Boom. Harissa was sent flying like a cannonball, but Tang Wulin's face also paled significantly in the wake of that strike. He immediately rushed over to Ling Zichen and Lu Jingyun, then swept his golden trident through the air to unleash a powerful eruption of golden light that sent all of the surrounding death cavaliers flying. In the next instant, green light enveloped all three of them, and they suddenly vanished on the spot. Harissa was sent flying for over a kilometer, and only stopped after crashing through countless rocks and trees. By the time he drew to a halt, the golden halos around him had already disappeared, and in reality, he had only been immobilized for just over a second. Harissa immediately came to the realization that Tang Wulin hadn't fully mastered the transcendent divine weapon, and he was immediately overcome by a sense of frustration. Of course, there was no way that a hyper Douluo could fully master a transcendent divine weapon. One had to gain the acknowledgement of such a weapon if they wanted to use it to its full potential. As such, if he had continued and unleashed his Night Soul skill, there was a very good chance that Tang Wulin wouldn't even have been able to unleash that soul skill with his transcendent divine weapon. Not only was Harissa regretting the fact that he had let Tang Wulin get away, he was even more frustrated that he hadn't obtained that transcendent divine weapon. Chapter 1664. A transcendent divine weapon would definitely be unimaginably beneficial to a quasi-god. If he could obtain that transcendent divine weapon and completely master it, there was a very good chance that he would be able to break through the restriction of this realm and become a god. He could even go on to create his very own divine realm. Never did he think that this would be the outcome of this operation. However, after a brief moment of regret and frustration, a scorching flame was ignited in his heart. A transcendent divine weapon was even more alluring to him than the project that the Holy Spirit cult was currently undertaking, as a transcendent divine weapon could be controlled by a single person. So he didn't need anyone else. If he could obtain that transcendent divine weapon, then the possibilities were endless. The deathly aura subsided, and everything returned to darkness. Harissa cast a cold glance toward Shrek Academy with greed in his eyes, then vanished into the night sky. Meanwhile, Tang Wulin, Ling Zichen, and Lu Jingyun reappeared amid a flash of green light, and Ling Zichen and Lu Jingyun were surprised to discover that they had fallen into a body of water, enveloped within the layer of green light. There was no need for them to worry about their ability to breathe. Where are we? Ling Zichen asked. Tang Wulin placed a finger over his lips in a shushing gesture, then said, I have to go, but I won't be gone for too long. Go back and wait for me for now. He swept his hands through the water as he spoke, releasing two bursts of enormous propulsion force that ejected Ling Zichen and Lu Jingyun out of the water like a pair of cannonballs. The entire world spun around the two of them, and in the next instant, they found themselves hovering in midair. Both of them hurriedly controlled their own bodies to prevent themselves from falling, and only then did they discover that they were currently situated above the Sea God's Lake with Shrek Academy looming in the distance. How had they come back? The two of them exchanged a bewildered glance, then looked down at the lake to find a burst of golden light vanishing into it. What do we do? Head researcher Ling, let's go back to the academy. Don't tell anyone what happened today. Ling Zichen replied without any hesitation. I understand. Lu Jingyun hurriedly replied. Ling Zichen's brows were tightly furrowed as she contemplated everything that had just happened. None of this could be explained using science, and that was extremely frustrating for a scientist like her. After returning to the academy, she decided to go and find Yali. Yali was Tang Wulin's godmother, so she felt that Yali was the most trustworthy figure to approach. In the Sea God's Lake, Tang Wulin only had a chance to extend a bow toward the Tree of Life before he vanished amid a flash of golden light. As a transcendent divine weapon, the Sea God's trident wasn't that easy to use. Tang Wulin had already passed 2 trials of the Sea God, so he could already use it as a normal weapon, but if he wanted to unleash a divine skill like unpredictable storm with the golden trident, then he would have to face another trial. He would at least have to complete another trial to go back, and if he couldn't complete the trial, then he would lose the right to use the golden trident. If he had been alone, he could have teleported himself back to Shrek Academy through his connection with the Tree of Life at any time. However, Ling Zichen and Lu Jingyun were accompanying him, so he couldn't escape alone. Thus, in that dire situation, he was forced to unleash unpredictable storm to temporarily immobilize Harissa, thereby giving all 3 of them a chance to escape. Teleporting the 2 of them along with him didn't affect him at all, but it was far more taxing for the Tree of Life. Now, it was time for him to face the 3rd trial of the Sea God. Golden light flashed, and Tang Wulin was instantly transported into a golden world. All of a sudden, he heard a series of affectionate calls that seemed to come from his loved ones, and they included the voices of his father and mother. In the next instant, the surrounding area suddenly became clear, and the golden world was replaced by an astonishing scene. Countless valleys appeared in his field of view, all of which were unfathomably deep. However, all of them were of a brownish yellow color and were devoid of any plant life, striking one with a sense of barren hopelessness. He looked up to discover that there were 3 suns in the sky, 2 of which were purple, while one was white, and the light they were giving off was rather unsettling somehow. Tang Wulin tried to move his own body, but he discovered that he was unable to do so and could only observe. In the next instant, he caught sight of a familiar figure. This was a man with long, disheveled blue hair, and he seemed to be quite exhausted, but the look in his eyes was one of unrivaled determination. He stood on a mountain peak, looking into the distance with bluish golden light radiating from his body. His body was riddled with wounds, but his back was still ramrod straight. Tang Wulin cast his gaze toward the same direction and discovered that there was another figure standing atop a mountain peak at least 10,000 meters away. In fact, there were several other figures standing on the neighboring mountain peaks as well. The central figure was tall and broad with a long staff in his hand, and for some reason, Tang Wulin was reminded of Kayangyu Dongfang's coiling dragon staff at the side of this staff. The 2 of them gave off the same unyielding aura, but in contrast with this imposing figure, Kayangyu Dongfang was as insignificant as a mere ant. The staff in the imposing figure's grasp was shimmering with radiant light, and his unyielding will seemed to be threatening to destroy this entire world. Atop the mountain peak to his left stood an ordinary-looking man, remarkable only for the look in his eyes, which was extremely cold and completely dead. From this man, Tang Wulin could sense the aura of Harissa, whom he had just battled earlier. However, this man was wielding a claymore with both hands, and the claymore was giving off exuberant vitality. Yet at the same time, he had a short sword strapped diagonally across his chest, and that sword was giving off a fearsome deathly aura. The auras of life and death intertwined, resulting in a combination that was no less formidable than that of the staff-wielding figure. As for the figure on the right, he was most eye-catching as he had 6 pairs of wings, all of which were currently flapping gently. He had a horrifying aura of bloodlust and insanity, and every single inch of his body, including his full suit of armor, were all of a deep crimson color. The 3 of them were also riddled with wounds, but they were clearly standing against the blue-haired figure. Are they father's enemies? That's right, the blue-haired figure was none other than Tang Wulin's father, Sea God Tang San. Just give up. In our hearts, you've already won, but the final outcome can't be altered, the staff-wielding man said. Tang San smiled, and asked, do you think you've already won? The staff-wielding man's brows furrowed slightly upon hearing this. What unforeseen circumstances could there be at our level? Tang San replied, there normally wouldn't be anything, but my son's here, so maybe something will change. Wulin, take a good look. I'm going to show you the true power of the Sea God's trident. He swept a hand through the air as he spoke, and Tang Wulin instantly plummeted out of the sky. In the next instant, he was stunned to discover that he had become the Sea God's trident, and in the instant Tang San gripped onto the trident, it seemed to have completely sprung to life. This was a sensation that couldn't be described using words. All Tang Wulin could sense was that in that instant, something extra seemed to have appeared in his heart. He could see that a trident seal had appeared in his spiritual world, and this seal had come from the Sea God. In the next instant, Tang San let loose a long roar akin to the deafening crashing of countless waves in the sea. The golden trident was swept through the air, and the entire surrounding area was transformed into a sea of gold. Father. Tang Wulin yelled in his own heart. He didn't know what his father was currently facing, but he was definitely up against powerful enemies. He wanted nothing more than to go to his father's side to help him, but he was unable to do anything. He couldn't even see what was going on anymore. Wulin, this is a battle between gods. I'm going to win no matter what, as only then will I be able to return and find you. Wait for me, my son. Boom. Tang Wulin's mind turned completely blank, and after what seemed like an eternity, he returned to that golden world. The shimmering golden Sea God's trident stood right before him, but it was riddled with countless gashes of different sizes and depths. Only the tines of the trident remained completely unscathed. The 3rd trial of the Sea God, Seal, has been completed. You can choose to return or continue undertaking more trials. Chapter 1665. Tang Wulin was panting heavily, but he didn't know whether he was actually breathing in this strange world, and he was constantly gasping for breath. Even though he had only witnessed a very short scene, it had left an extremely deep impression in his heart. The auras of his father and those 3 other beings had been imprinted deep into Tang Wulin's mind, and in the final instant, where his father had unleashed the power of the Sea God's trident, something seemed to have suddenly clicked in his mind. This was a very peculiar sensation that couldn't be described through words, but it was definitely real. Only after a long while did Tang Wulin manage to catch his breath. Return. Golden light flashed, and in the next instant, he was plunged into the cool and refreshing water of the sea god's lake. Returning to reality was also a very comforting feeling, and he reflexively stretched while heaving a long sigh of relief. He thought back to what he had just witnessed over and over again, particularly the words that his father had spoken to him at the end. It was only a brief message, but through it, he could sense his father's love, and it was this fatherly love that was supporting Tang San in his battle against the gods. Why was it that his father was facing such formidable opponents? Tang San was already a god king. Just how powerful were his opponents to have forced him to that extent? You have to win, father. The gashes on the sea god's trident were a clear indication of just how ferocious the battle had been. However, as Tang Wulin summoned the sea god's trident, he discovered that it was completely unscathed, as if the damaged trident he had seen in that golden space had been nothing more than an illusion. He reached out to grab the trident, and he could immediately sense that he now had a greater level of affinity with the weapon. He could sense that he had grown closer to this transcendent divine weapon and was better able to use it. Tang Wulin had confidence in both himself and his father. If it weren't for the fact that he had to set off to steal eternal heaven soon, he really wanted to complete all 9 trials of the sea god so he could truly master this transcendent divine weapon. Furthermore, he could sense that this transcendent divine weapon was a bridge between him and his father, and through it, he seemed to be able to see the situation on his father's end. Father, I'm going to work hard to become powerful as well so I can find you. Mother, and big sister. A burst of rich life energy suddenly swept toward Tang Wulin, enveloping his entire body in a warm and comfortable embrace. Thank you, Tang Wulin said as he turned to the tree of life. Perhaps it was due to the fact that the last burst of life energy had been completely digested, but the tree of life was no longer growing. Even so, its mere presence instilled within Tang Wulin a sense of comfort and security. Tang Wulin drifted over to the tree of life, and a green light barrier kept out the water around him as he sat down to meditate. This was an instinctive gesture made so that he could absorb everything that he had seen in the third trial. Even though he had only witnessed the auras of those 4 almighty beings, they were imprinted deep into his mind, just like that trident seal. This was by far the shortest of the 3 trials he had endured, but Tang Wulin could clearly sense that it would require the most time for him to digest and absorb what he had seen. Learning from those auras would perhaps be a vital step for his future breakthrough to become a limit Douluo. Ling Zichen had just finished her recount, and Yeli's brows furrowed slightly as she said, "So Harissa decided to resurface at a time like this. Don't worry, Wulin will be fine." She was well aware of Tang Wulin's relationship with the Tree of Life. Ever since the Tree of Life's revival, Tang Wulin had essentially attained an immortal body. So long as the Tree of Life continued to exist, it would be next to impossible to kill Tang Wulin as he could return to the Tree of Life at any time. This stemmed from the blessing of the plane, so only power that exceeded planar power would be able to sever this connection. Harissa was extremely powerful, but he was still only a quasi-god. As for why Tang Wulin had been mysteriously teleported away, Yali knew that this had something to do with the many secrets he had been harboring. All of the limit Douluo of Shrek Academy and the Tang sect were aware of the existence of those secrets to a certain extent, but they were sure that this wouldn't affect Tang Wulin's mental state. The most important reason for this was that he was the son of nature and the one blessed by the plane. There was no way that the plane and the Tree of Life would misjudge his character. This was why the amorous Douluo and heartless Douluo had been so decisive in making Tang Wulin the new Tang sect master. Furthermore, he was being protected by the Tree of Life, so there was no need to worry about his safety. That's good to hear, but that enemy really was extremely powerful, Ling Zichen said with tightly furrowed brows. It's all right, the current Shrek Academy is well equipped to deal with them. You must be tired as well. Go back and rest. Ling Zichen nodded before departing, but she didn't go to rest. For a scientist like her, rest was a luxury. In particular, after witnessing the power of Tang Wulin and Harissa, she was inspired and had developed new ideas surrounding several of her research projects that were currently at a critical juncture. She had always thought that her divine braid mecha was very powerful, but it was apparent that it still wasn't powerful enough to contend with the limit Douluo. She needed more offensive power. As for the side effects, who cares? Power was the most important thing. Unbeknownst to Tang Wulin, his battle against Harissa had brought on another wave of insanity for Ling Zichen. 1 week later, the Soul train drew to a smooth halt in the Bright City Soul train station, and the passengers got out before flooding toward the exit. After everyone else had disembarked, a few people emerged from different carriages. The carriages weren't far away from one another, but they still made sure to engage in silent communication by exchanging glances with one another. A man and a woman had emerged from the final carriage, and the former was a handsome man who appeared to be in his 20s with a head of dashing blue hair, while the latter was a woman wearing a tight-fitting jumpsuit that perfectly highlighted her explosive curls. The woman wore a faint smile and had an arm wound around one of the young man's arms. Anyone familiar with this woman would undoubtedly be stunned by what they were seeing. This woman was none other than Ling Zichen, the epitome of chaos, violence, and insanity. Yet now, she was clinging to the young man like an obedient wife. Chapter 1666. Ling Zichen wasn't even in disguise, and in reality, she didn't need one anyway. She had always been a top-secret figure in the Tang sect, so barely anyone in the outside world knew who she was. So upon her insistence, no disguise was applied to her. The man accompanying her was naturally none other than Tang Wulin. Tang Wulin had entered a state of deep meditation for 3 days in the Sea God's Lake, and following his awakening, he perfected the plan for this operation, and they immediately set off. The Sea God Legion had already reached the North Sea Legion's location, but it would still take some time to mobilize the army for such a long-distance conquest. All of the resource and personnel mobilization required time to complete, and by the Tang sect's estimates, it would take 2 to 3 months for the Federation to be ready. However, the Tang sect and Shrek Academy couldn't wait. As long as Eternal Heaven was outside their grasp, it would pose a major threat both to the newly rebuilt Shrek Academy and to the other 2 continents. Furthermore, the earlier they acted, the more time they would have to make adjustments if and when required. Thus, they arrived at Bright City using different identities and disguises. There weren't many people involved, only Shrek 7 monsters, Ling Zichen, Sima Jinkai, and Araheng. This 10-man team was to carry out the all-important operation. All of them exited the train station one after another, as if they didn't recognize each other, then departed using different modes of transportation. Tang Wulin and Ling Zichen got into the same taxi, and the driver's gaze remained fixed up ahead, but he greeted, "Welcome, Sect Master." Tang Wulin nodded in response. "Let's go." At this point, Ling Zichen had already released his arm. She didn't say anything, but her smile had been replaced by a cold expression. Tang Wulin had no idea what was going on with her. She had been like this ever since he had awakened from his deep meditation and returned to the academy, and it seemed that their relationship had worsened compared to before. Tang Wulin didn't know what he had done to offend her, and he didn't dare to ask. In any case, he didn't want to interact much with Ling Zichen anyway, so this suited him just fine. Despite her cold demeanor, Ling Zichen had been very cooperative and had described to everyone on several occasions the technology of Eternal Heaven and the Battle God Hall's defense system. As was customary in Bright City, traffic jams were frequently encountered, and only after close to an hour did the taxi finally reach a house on the outskirts of the city. The house was situated only less than 20 kilometers from the Western Mountains, and it had been developed into an affluent area due to the fact that there was a very picturesque lake nearby. The house they had arrived at was one of the mansions in the wealthy area. The mansion was designed like a palace with a 3-story main building, as well as a multi-purpose secondary building complete with a restaurant, gym, etc. The entire mansion belonged to the Tang sect, and within its luxurious exterior were many pieces of the most cutting-edge technology on the current Douluo continent. There were all types of detection soul tools in the mansion, which could immediately discover any sources of powerful energy that appeared within a radius of 10 kilometers. Only the high-ranking core of the Tang sect were aware of this mansion's existence, and it was one of the Tang sect's research centers in Bright City. This clearly wasn't the first time that Ling Zichen had been here, and as they entered the mansion, none of the Tang sect disciples in the mansion recognized Tang Wulin, but they were extremely familiar with her. The mansion was massive with the main building and secondary building taking up over 3,000 square meters, and there was a rectangular swimming pool in the yard. Due to the lack of traffic congestion on the outskirts of the city, it would only take half an hour to drive to the Western Mountains from this mansion. Everyone settled into their assigned rooms, and as the Tang sect master, Tang Wulin was naturally living on the highest floor. From his balcony, Tang Wulin had a clear view of their destination for this trip. The Western Mountains had once been a strategic location due to its proximity to Bright City, but its strategic importance had waned after the Federation had united the continent. Tang Wulin could actually only see around halfway up the mountain, and even his purple demon eyes couldn't pierce through the clouds and mist. The peak of the tallest mountain in the Western Mountains was situated above the clouds, and there were all types of disruptive soul tools set up on the mountain peak by the Battle God Hall to avoid any pesky spies. The Central Legion was situated at the foot of that same mountain, and all of the most important facilities of the Legion were in the Western Mountains, so the entire place was naturally extremely tightly guarded. In order to infiltrate such a stronghold, intelligence and luck would be required in addition to power. Firstly, they had to gain access to the Battle God Hall. Once they made it into the Battle God Hall, the safe harbor rule would prevent the Central Legion from coming after them. Chen Shen Xingji currently wasn't in the Battle God Hall, so it would undoubtedly be far easier to conquer the 18 levels. After thinking through the plan again, Tang Wulin's mind gradually began to wander. What was she doing? Was she stealing the spirit pagoda? The longer he was separated from her, the more he missed her. Right at this moment, someone slapped him on the shoulder and jerked him back to reality. How are you going to leave everyone when you're so complacent and unalert? Ling Zichen scoffed with a disdainful expression. Tang Wulin merely smiled and offered no explanation. If she had posed a threat to him, he would immediately detect her approach. You're thinking about a woman, right? Ling Zichen asked with an intense gaze. Tang Wulin glanced at her and remained silent. What's she like? Why isn't she by your side? Ling Zichen asked. Tang Wulin replied, don't ask about things you shouldn't ask about. Ling Zichen placed her hands on her hips and scoffed. What kind of answer is that? Are you embarrassed of her? Tang Wulin's brows furrowed slightly upon hearing this. Go back and rest. We're about to set off soon. You're no fun to talk to at all. Ling Zichen turned to storm away, but quickly stopped and asked, when are you going to tell me the complete plan? Are you only going to tell everyone right before we set off? Tang Wulin answered her questions with one of his own. Do you know why the others don't ask the same questions as you? Why? Ling Zichen asked. Tang Wulin replied, because they have absolute trust in me. Ling Zichen immediately flared up with rage. I don't have any history with you, so why should I trust you? Are you going to tell me or not? You've been getting on my nerves for a long time. Tang Wulin sighed. I just want some peace and quiet. Can I tell you tomorrow? No, it has to be now. Ling Zichen was clearly being unreasonable, and even she didn't understand why she was acting like this. Tang Wulin took a meaningful look at her before replying in a calm manner. All right, let me tell you the plan. Chapter 1667. There's no way we can go through the Central Legion by force, and as you outlined, they have the most advanced detection devices, so it won't be easy to sneak into the Legion, either. As such, the only viable method for us is infiltration. Ling Zichen was quite intrigued to hear this. Infiltration? How is that different from sneaking into the Legion? Tang Wulin smiled and replied, sneaking in relies solely on our own power, whereas infiltration requires borrowing power from external sources, thereby drastically improving our chances of success. Ling Zichen asked, then how do we infiltrate? Tang Wulin replied, any soldier of any rank can try to conquer the Battle God Hall, right? In that case, we have to all become soldiers. As the most powerful legion of the Douluo Federation, the Central Legion had a funny nickname, which was the adored child of the Federation. The Legion was fitted with almost all of the Federation's most advanced weapons and equipment, and the Federation would even take elite soldiers from other legions and place them in the Central Legion. Only the most elite soldiers and military officials could become a member of the Central Legion, and the Legion was over 100,000 strong. In fact, if all of the additional staff were taken into account, the Legion would have over 300,000 members. Logistics and work behind the scenes were extremely important for all legions, and an astronomical sum was spent on this area in the Central Legion every year. The Central Legion was also the most powerful military force under the government's control. All other legions were influenced by some military families, but the Central Legion followed no orders aside from those of the federal government. Any family who dared to try and seize control of the Central Legion would be severely punished by all of the other military families. This was already an unspoken rule. It was exactly due to the existence of the Central Legion that the government was able to maintain its rule over the entire Federation. The Central Legion was situated in the Western Mountains, as well as all around Bright City to protect the capital city from all directions. Around 50,000 troops from the Central Legion were gathered in the Western Mountains, and they were accompanied by all types of large soul weapons and facilities. The largest mountain in the area had almost been completely hollowed out, and it contained many powerful soul weapons and high-grade soul missiles, all of which the government had full control over. It was said that there were over 100 ninth-grade soul missiles in that mountain, as well as super launchers that could blast those soul missiles to any corner of the Douluo continent at a moment's notice. Some of the Federation's most important research units were also situated in the Western Mountains, particularly those related to space exploration. Shen Xing emerged from the Legion's training ground and took a deep breath of the fresh air outside. Her epaulets indicated that she was now a lieutenant colonel. Ever since she was transferred to the Central Legion, she had been nurtured as an elite member of the military, and her career had been set on the right path. The major families couldn't control the Central Legion, but all of them were able to send some members into the Central Legion for training and to improve their resumes. If one were deemed to be an exceptional talent more willing to swear a vow of fealty to the government alone, thereby cutting ties with their family, they could be promoted to a high rank in the Central Legion. Of course, they couldn't become the highest ranking officials of the Central Legion, as there was a special rule that stated that only those who hailed from average families had the right to work their way up the ranks to the very top. Shen Xing had already grown accustomed to daily life here. Her rigorous daily training regimen allowed her to make rapid improvement, and she was beginning to fall in love with the feeling of taking a hot shower after a laborious and sweaty training session, then emerging from the training ground in a set of clean clothes. This was always when she felt like she was most in her element. Beep beep, beep beep. The soul communicator on her wrist suddenly registered a call. Shen Xing glanced down at the number, and an exasperated look appeared on her face, but she had no choice but to accept the call. What is it, big sister? If you're trying to set me up on another blind date, then just forget about it. As a lieutenant general, Shen Yue had a natural air of authority about her, and she replied, why can't I set you up on a blind date? Do you not know how old you are? Father has already said that you don't need to engage in any political marriage, and blind date partners we've chosen for you are handsome young talents. So what's your problem? Why aren't you willing to give it a chance? Didn't you say you already recovered from your mental trauma? At the mention of mental trauma, a figure instantly flashed through Shen Xing's mind, but she replied, you're my target, big sister. Why do I need a man? I'm a woman who's going to become a general, who's going to be a match for me. Shen Yue heaved a resigned sigh. Well, you still have to give it a try. You can't just go on like this. What am I supposed to tell our parents? I don't care what you say. Father chose the youngest colonel in the Sea God Legion for you this time, and his family background is very good as well, so you have to go and see him. If you fail to show up again, I'll transfer you back from the Central Legion, and I'll make sure your military career hits a dead end. Shen Xing immediately protested. How could you do that, big sister? You're mixing family matters with official duties. Are you afraid of being punished by the military? Shen Yue chuckled coldly in response. Don't forget that I'm a lieutenant general. The military won't punish me over some insignificant lieutenant colonel. Cut the chit-chat. Are you going or not? Shen Xing pouted in an indignant manner and replied, fine, I'll go, but I'm not making any guarantees aside from that. Only then did Shen Yue's voice become more gentle, and she said, that's a good girl. Who knows? Maybe you'll like him. No one's going to force you into marriage anyway. What's the time and location? Shen Xing asked. 7 p.m. tonight at the Longqi restaurant of the Zai Holiday Resort. Tonight? Shen Xing's voice explained. That's way too rushed. He clearly doesn't have any sincerity. I don't think I want to go anymore. Cut the crap. If I had informed you in advance, you would have come up with some other excuse. I know your schedule back to front. You have nothing going on today after training, so don't even think about cancelling, and don't be late. As soon as her voice trailed off, Shen Yue immediately ended the call. Shen Xing stomped her foot onto the ground in a frustrated manner, but couldn't do anything. This is textbook bullying. How could she do this? Shen Xing grumbled. However, her anger quickly gave way to resignation. She was only a lieutenant colonel. How could she contend with her lieutenant general sister? Most importantly, her parents were standing against her as well. Her cheeks were already slightly flushed from training, and the flush had deepened even further from her anger. However, she had no choice in the matter. Thus, she returned to her dorm room and changed into some casual clothes. She didn't bother to put on any makeup, and arranged her hair into a simple ponytail before setting off in her car towards Xingmei Holiday Resort. Xingmei Holiday Resort was situated on the western outskirts of Bright City, and it was quite close to the Central Legion, so it naturally had a military background. To put it in simpler terms, this was a recreational venue for military officials. Soldiers were still people, and military officials had dedicated their entire lives to the military, so they needed a place for relaxation and recreation as well. Of course, the prerequisite for entry was quite high. Only those that are above the captain rank would be granted entry. Due to the fact that this place had been set up for military officials, the prices there were very cheap, so it was very popular among military officials. Less than half an hour later, Shen Xing parked her car into the spacious car park of Xingmei Holiday Resort. Even now, Shen Xing was still quite enraged. She was definitely going to grill her blind date partner and give him a piece of her mind. Now that she thought about it, Shen Yue hadn't told her which booth of Longqi restaurant she was supposed to go to. She seriously considered whether this would be an excuse for her to not turn up, but she quickly decided that Shen Yue definitely wouldn't let her off the hook if she were to ditch the blind date with such a trivial excuse. Thus, she dialed Shen Yue's number, and the call was quickly connected. What is it? I'm telling you, Shen Xing, if you don't go. All right, I know. I'm already here, but you didn't tell me which booth I need to go to. Shenzing replied in an exaggerated manner. Chapter 1668. Shen Yue's voice immediately mellowed out upon hearing this. Oh, silly me. I reserved the booth, so just give the employees my name. It's almost time, so he should have arrived as well. Make sure to report back to me after your blind date. All right, I'm hanging up. Shenzing ended the call and grumbled to herself for a moment before emerging from the car with her purse. Xingmei Holiday Resort was a very large resort, but Shenzing had come here before, so she was quite familiar with this place. Longqi Restaurant was on the first floor of the resort's main building, so it was very easy to find, and the restaurant was renowned for its authentic Bright City dishes. The restaurants had many booths as this was a place for military officials to dine and relax, so they didn't want to meet too many of their colleagues. Booth for Shen Yue, Shenzing said as she reached the front desk. Please come with me. The waitress made an inviting hand gesture, then led the way for Shenzing to a booth named Spicy Pavilion. Your friend has already arrived, the waitress said as she gently knocked on the door before pushing it open. For some reason, a hint of envy had appeared on the waitress's face as she spoke. Shenzing intentionally put on a cold and forbidding expression before making her way into the booth. The booth was rather antiquated in design and decor, with a four-seater dining table and a small sofa beside it. Across from the door was a window, through which a picturesque small lake was visible. As Shenzing made her way into the booth, she caught sight of a man standing in front of the window, looking out at the scenery outside. Shenzing's expression immediately turned into one of surprise at the sight of him. She could only see his profile from the back, but a peculiar feeling had welled up in her heart. The man was tall and not particularly muscular, but his back was very straight, and he had an extremely well-proportioned figure, as well as a head of even black hair. His white military uniform was tight-fitting and perfectly highlighted his figure, which was comprised of broad shoulders, a wide back, and a streamlined, athletic waist. Shenzing was stunned to discover that from the back profile alone, he was completely impeccable. In the next instant, her attention was drawn to his epaulets. This man was a major general. Didn't Shen Yue say that he was only a lieutenant colonel? How could Shen Yue do this to her? A major general had to be an old man already. His figure was exceptional, but he had to at least be 40. With that in mind, Shenzing couldn't help but clear her throat. Attention. An authoritative command suddenly rang out. Having been in the military for so many years, obeying orders from superiors had become second nature for Shen Yue, and she reflexively raised her head, puffed her chest out, and brought her feet together. She then immediately realized that she had been pranked, but before she had a chance to get angry, the man had already turned around. He had a pair of large and bright eyes that were very gentle, accompanied by long eyelashes that women would die for. His nose was pronounced and chiseled, and his beautiful lips were currently curved upward slightly in an amused smile. Shenzing's mind immediately went blank as her eyes were filled with incredulity, and she stared at the man before her in stunned silence. This was the face that had appeared in her dreams night upon night for so many years. It had taken her a Herculean effort to escape those nightmares, but now, the subject of those nightmares had appeared before her. Due to the fact that Xingmei Holiday Resort was a military facility, disguises were prohibited, so Tang Wulin was currently presenting himself in his true appearance. Shenzing took a reflexive step backward as Tang Wulin approached her, and she suddenly yelped as she tripped over her own feet and fell backward. Thankfully, Tang Wulin reacted very quickly and caught her by the waist so that she didn't fall over. At such close proximity, she could already clearly smell his refreshing scent, and all of a sudden, her entire body began to burn up, as if approaching him was like approaching a giant furnace. An indescribable sensation welled up in her heart, and she wanted nothing more than for the ground to open up and swallow her whole. Tang Wulin was rather perplexed by Shenzing's dazed and flushed appearance. He had investigated and planned extensively to set up this meeting with Shenzing, and he had envisioned many of Shenzing's possible reactions to seeing him, the likeliest of which he thought would be screaming. As such, as he turned around, he had released his soul power to seal this entire room, preventing all sound and soul power from escaping. Even soul communicators would malfunction under the influence of his immense spiritual power. However, never did he think that Shenzing would instantly become a statue. It was as if she had seen a ghost. Tang Wulin asked, "Am I that shocking to you, Miss Shen? You." Shenzing was finally able to speak, but she was stuttering incessantly, and even her breathing was accelerating. Tang Wulin injected a burst of gentle, mysterious heaven method soul power into Shenzing's body in a resigned manner, calming her rampant blood essence fluctuations, and only then did Shenzing gradually calm down. She blinked forcefully a few times, then quickly struggled out of Tang Wulin's arms and took a few steps backward. Why are you here? She had even surreptitiously pinched herself to ensure that she wasn't dreaming, and sure enough, it had hurt a lot. All of the information she had seen about him quickly flashed through her mind. He had defeated the entire Douluo Empire in the Trial of Five Gods, forging an undying legend. He was the Tang Sect Master and Sea God's Pavilion Master, yet he had been defeated by Silver Dragon Princess Yuna during the Joust for a spouse event. She was always full of resentment whenever she saw news reports about him, but she couldn't help but pay attention to those reports. She had always thought that she had already forgotten him, but as it turned out, that was far from the truth. Just as she thought that she would never meet this man again, he had suddenly appeared before her, and he was in the military uniform of a general. Go. Get out of here. Posing as a general is a major crime. Shenzing blurted out, and even she was stunned by what she was saying. Wasn't she supposed to be hurling abuse at him or quickly exposing him so that he could be captured? Why was she saying something like this instead? She really wanted the earth to swallow her up so she could have some peace and quiet and interrogate herself to see exactly what was going through her mind. Chapter 1669. Tang Wulin also faltered slightly upon hearing this. Not only was Shenzing not yelling or screaming, she was extending concern toward him instead. Was she playing some type of mind games? Tang Wulin stuck his hands into his pockets with a faint smile. How do you know I'm not an actual general? How is that possible? Shenzing stomped her foot in frustration and threatened, "Are you leaving or not? If not, then I'm going to scream." Tang Wulin shook his head in a resigned manner before taking a seat at the dining table, then withdrew his spiritual power before gently clapping his hands. A waiter had been waiting outside the entire time, and he immediately made his way into the booth. Shenzing faltered slightly at the sight of the waiter, while Tang Wulin instructed, "Bring on the food." "Yes, Major General," the waiter replied in a respectful manner, and only after taking an extra glance at Tang Wulin did he depart. Shenzing noticed that as the waiter made his way into the room, Tang Wulin's facial features had blurred and altered slightly, as had his aura, but everything returned to normal as soon as the waiter left. Just how powerful was he now? Shenzing knew about all of his exploits from the news reports, but she was still rather curious now that she was seeing him in person. She took a deep breath to calm herself down, then repeatedly reassured herself that there was nothing to be afraid of as this was the territory of the Central Legion. Tang Wulin leaned forward slightly and remarked, "You seem to be a little afraid of me." "Who's afraid of you?" Shenzing reflexively protested. Tang Wulin smiled and asked, "Then why is your mood swinging so drastically?" "You." Shenzing wanted to issue a retort, but regardless of what she said, it would be quite unconvincing. "Where's my blind date partner? What did you do to him? Also, how do you know about my schedule? Why are you here? Did you plan all of this? Posing as a general is a major crime. Even people from Shrek Academy and the Tang Sect aren't exempt from this law." Tang Wulin chuckled. "That's a long list of questions. I didn't think you would be such a righteous character. Rest assured, I'm not posing as a general. Take a look at this." He tossed a badge toward Shenzing as he spoke, and Shenzing reflexively caught the badge. All military identification badges had chips that would release the corresponding information upon injection of soul power. Shenzing pressed the badge onto her military soul communicator in a befuddled manner, and a string of information immediately appeared. Tang Wulin, male, 9th blood god of the Blood God Legion, Major General rank. The information about him was very detailed. Tang Wulin took a sip of water, and his mind was also racing as an astonished look gradually appeared on Shenzing's face. Shenzing's reaction was different from what he had anticipated, and this required him to change his plan a little. He had discovered that Shenzing was a military official in the Central Legion while carefully scouring through the Tang Sect's database. Back when he had visited the demonic island for his training, he had abducted Shenzing, and at that time, he had deduced that she was no ordinary character. Sure enough, not only had she been promoted since then, she was currently occupying a very important position. One had to realize that being abducted could definitely count as a blemish on a normal military official's resume. Yet instead of being demoted, she had been promoted, and that was sufficient testament to just how powerful her background was. Thus, Tang Wulin had chosen Shenzing among many candidates and conducted a deep investigation into her. Thus, Tang Wulin knew even more about Shenzing than she did about him. Sneaking into Xingmei Holiday Resort was no problem for Tang Wulin. Of course, he had used a different identification badge than the one he had shown to Shenzing. His cover couldn't be blown yet, but forging a military identification badge was certainly no difficult task for the Tang Sect. Shenzing examined the badge for a long while but was unable to find any fallacies. "So you're really a general?" Normal soldiers weren't aware of of the Blood God Legion, but she certainly was. That was the Federation's most mysterious and most powerful legion. I came here to apologize for our first ever interaction. At the time, I was undergoing some training and was forced to infiltrate your legion. Please forgive me if my actions have affected you in any way. I'm treating you to this meal as a gesture of apology. Shenzing almost erupted on the spot upon hearing this. You think you can apologize with a lousy meal? Do you know how many nightmares you made me go through? She really wanted to slap Tang Wulin's head off, but for some reason, she couldn't bring herself to voice her fury at the sight of Tang Wulin's benevolent smile. In her heart, Tang Wulin was someone who could only operate in the shadows here, but after witnessing his identification badge, she realized that she had been completely wrong. This place didn't belong to the Spirit Pagoda, and she didn't have an excuse to detain or target him. As a result, Shenzing quickly sagged like a balloon, but at the same time, she was wondering whether this was the blind date partner Shen Yue had set her up with. What if that were the case? Should she accept him or not? Her mind was plunged into complete disarray once again. Tang Wulin was left feeling rather speechless. Shenzing was staring blankly at him again, and he couldn't help but wonder if she was always facing out like this. Right at this moment, the waiter brought in the first batch of dishes. Tang Wulin had a big appetite, and as a gesture of sincerity, he had ordered a lot of food, all of which were specialty dishes of this restaurant. Only then did Shenzing return to her senses, and after the waiter left, she glowered at Tang Wulin as she repeated, "Where is my blind date partner?" Tang Wulin replied, "Don't worry, he's fine. He was a little sleepy, so I found him a place to rest. He'll probably wake up after our meal." For some reason, an overwhelming sense of disappointment welled up in Shenzing's heart upon hearing this. She immediately told herself that this was an irrational feeling, but she couldn't shake it off. "Have some food," Tang Wulin said as he made an inviting hand gesture, then began to dig into the meal. Shenzing faltered slightly upon seeing this. She discovered that Tang Wulin ate in a very graceful manner that didn't appear rushed at all, but the food on the table was rapidly vanishing, and in the blink of an eye, around a third of it was gone. "Have you never eaten before?" Shenzing scoffed. Tang Wulin smiled and replied, "I didn't grow up in a very wealthy family, so I really cherish my food. You should have some too." After that, he began to focus on eating again. Fine. Shenzing was rather hungry from her training anyway, and she was a soul master, so her basal metabolic rate far exceeded that of an ordinary person. At the rate that Tang Wulin was going through the food, "It'll be all gone if I don't dig in soon. How is he treating me to a meal when he's eating all the food?" With that in mind, Shenzing immediately began to eat as well. In order to grab more food, she had abandoned her table manners, and she had even dragged her favorite dish over to herself so that Tang Wulin wouldn't be able to reach it. Chapter 1670. She then discovered that Tang Wulin had stopped and seemed to be looking at her in a surprised manner. A slightly smug look appeared on Shenzing's face upon seeing this. Right at this moment, the door of the booth was opened, and the waiter strode in, just in time to see Shenzing with her left arm on the table, protecting the 3 dishes before her, while delivering a chunk of meat into her own mouth with a fork in her right hand. The waiter folded slightly upon seeing this, and it was clear that he had never served anyone with such terrible table manners before. The patrons who frequented this restaurant were all military officials, not starving dogs. How long had this woman been starving for? Shenzing was so embarrassed that she wanted to die. That bastard had to have stopped because he already detected that the waiter was about to come in. "Get her a bowl of rice," Tang Wulin said with a smile. Only then did the waiter return to his senses, and he hurriedly placed some dishes onto the table before departing. Shenzing choked down that chunk of meat before slamming her fork onto the table with a deep blush on her face. "It's all your fault," Tang Wulin countered with a wry smile. "I told you to eat. I didn't tell you to eat like this. Don't worry, I'll make sure there's enough." He made an inviting hand gesture as he spoke. "You invited me here just to treat me to a meal. Tell me what you want." Shenzing really wanted to strangle him to death. However, she was aware that this was a man who had defeated an entire kingdom on his own, and she was far from being able to contend with him. As such, all she wanted was to leave this place as quickly as possible. Tang Wulin asked, "Does that mean you accept my apology? Accept my ass?" Shenzing flared up with rage as she rose to her feet, just as the waiter walked in again. "Get out." Shenzing roared. The waiter was given quite a fright and hurriedly placed a bowl of rice onto the table. Tang Wulin smiled and said, "My apologies. My girlfriend is in a rather foul mood today. You can go now. I'll call for you if I need you." "Yes, General." The waiter immediately fled as if he had been pardoned. "I'm not your girlfriend." Shenzing was becoming more and more enraged. Tang Wulin sighed. "Can't we talk in a more civilized manner? I don't want to be civilized." Shenzing protested. Tang Wulin didn't offer a response to this. He felt like it was necessary for Shenzing to calm down. Otherwise, communication simply wouldn't be possible. Furthermore, he didn't even know why Shenzing was so angry. All of a sudden, Shenzing rose to her feet and grabbed her purse to leave. She didn't want to see Tang Wulin at all, and she knew that she was going to have those dreams again tonight. "Don't go." A burst of gentle light appeared in Shenzing's way. Shenzing spun around with a furious expression. "You're going to subdue me through violence again, aren't you?" Tang Wulin sighed. "Why can't we just have a calm talk? I haven't done anything, have I? If you still can't get over what happened back then, I can repay you. I have some power. Tell me what you want, and I'll try to make it up to you. I don't want to talk to you." Shenzing was struck by a sense of satisfaction upon turning Tang Wulin down. Tang Wulin sighed. "I don't want to have to use violence against you." Shenzing faltered slightly upon hearing this. "This is the Central Legion's territory. You wouldn't dare to use violence here." Tang Wulin shrugged in response. "I recall we were also in the Legion the first time we met. You." He was right. "What do you want?" Shenzing asked as she put her hands on her hips and glowered at Tang Wulin. Tang Wulin smiled and replied, "I came here to apologize and to ask you for a small favor. What do you need?" A wary look immediately appeared on Shenzing's face. Tang Wulin replied, "Don't worry, it's not a big deal for you. You see, I'm a major general now, and it's very difficult for me to rise further up the ranks. I heard that conquering levels of the Battle God Hall is a shortcut for promotion. With my abilities, I should be able to conquer a few levels and land a general rank or something like that." Shenzing could hardly believe her own ears. The general rank was the highest rank in the army, and it had been many years since one last appeared. Yet Tang Wulin was talking about it in such a nonchalant manner. "Do you think your family runs the Battle God Hall? Don't you know that soldiers of the title Douluo level or above who challenge the Battle God Hall will face battle gods a rank above them? That means that if you're a title Douluo, you'll have to face a hyper Douluo, and if you're a hyper Douluo, you'll have to face a limit Douluo. Do you think this is easy?" Tang Wulin shrugged in response. "I won't know until I try. The favor I'm asking you is very simple. Just take me to the entrance of the Battle God Hall. Going through official procedures is too complicated, and due to my sensitive identity, I would most likely be barred from entry. I'm sure you wouldn't refuse such a small favor, would you?" Shenzing finally understood why Tang Wulin had sought her out. In all honesty, this request actually came as a relief to her. At the very least, it was far easier than stealing military secrets, as she had imagined that Tang Wulin would request from her. Theoretically speaking, the Battle God Hall was open to all military officials and even soldiers. However, they had to go through rigorous examinations to decide whether they could challenge the Battle God Hall. Otherwise, the Battle God Hall would be flooded by challengers. If Tang Wulin really were a major general, then he would be entitled to enter the Battle God Hall. But just as he said, it would not be easy for him to gain entry due to the fact that he was the Tang Sect Master and Sea God's Pavilion Master. The military certainly wasn't just going to stand by and watch as he became a general. Could she take him there? Shenzing's breathing was beginning to accelerate, and she stared intently at Tang Wulin as she contemplated this question. Tang Wulin was in no hurry, either, and silently awaited her verdict. Shenzing suddenly asked, "What do I get for helping you?" Tang Wulin smiled and asked, "What would you like? Money? Spirit items?" All of a sudden, Shenzing made a decision, and her mind became extremely clear. "All right, I can help you. That's great." Tang Wulin's eyes immediately lit up. Their chances of success would be far higher if Shenzing were willing to help them rather than being forced against her will. Shenzing continued, "I want 3 favors from you that I can redeem at any time, and you can't refuse those favors unless they go against your morals." Tang Wulin raised an eyebrow upon hearing this. "Aren't you being a little too greedy?" She didn't appear to have asked for anything tangible, but this was actually an extremely extravagant request. With Tang Wulin's current status, a favor from him was priceless, and if he were to agree, he would have to constantly keep this in the back of his mind. Thanks so much for watching this video. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Also leave a comment down below with suggestions on what novels to read.